Hey guys, welcome back to another video on my channel, another video miniature game. So, as you guys know, move transposition, an opening move transposition, is when a player starts out the game with a certain move order, but after a few moves, the position transforms into another opening or defense. Strong players have a good understanding of all the openings. However, they may specialize in certain positions. So, one of the things grandmasters try to do, if they can, is to put their opponents into positions where they might not be so familiar with the nuances of the opening or the defense. I have the feeling that Karthik in this game decides to try out this strategy. With the white players, Karthik Venkataraman, 2565 from India, a strong grandmaster, not top tier, but clearly in the second list of Indian grandmasters nearing 2600. With the black pieces, Huang Renji, he's rated 2491, that's 2500, still without a feeder title, basically because he hasn't accumulated enough norms to get his IM title, which you normally get at 2400. He's more likely going to get his grandmaster title before. This is quite typical with Asian players, especially Chinese players. They grow through the ranks playing on home turf, win a lot of games, accumulated lots of rating, but for some reason a lot of them don't get their titles in time, and they end up getting a grandmaster title straight away. Two very, very strong players, and the game is from the 8th round of the Sharjah Masters in United Arab Emirates. The tournament we're featuring these days. This is the second game from this tournament. So let's go with the game, and I think you're going to enjoy this one because not only will you learn move transpositions, but also there's some really cool tactics and some mating patterns that maybe you're not familiar with. So stay put and let's go with the game. d4 knight to f6, and Karthik plays bishop g5. Now this is called the Tromposky opening. Basically, white is threatening to exchange the knight, double black's pawns, and proceed from there. Of course, black has different ways to counter this opening. Knight to e4 is one of the most popular, hitting the bishop. Other moves are c5. g6 is a move which is played a lot by King's Indian players. d5 is one of the most solid moves. If Karthik exchanges now, black usually catches with the e-pawn and brings out the bishop to d6 and castles. And although black has a double pawn, theory says that the bishop pair generally should be at least giving black equal options in these types of positions. And I agree with that assessment. So Karthik doesn't exchange and plays knight to d2, just preparing development of knights. Knight b to d7, knight g to e f3, and now e6. Of course, this will allow white to play now e4, taking advantage of the pin on f6. And after pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, we have a move transposition. The game started off as the Tromposky, but now this is a variation of the French defense. So, who benefits from this transposition? Depends. If Karthik before the game, when he prepared the variations, noticed that his opponent doesn't play the French defense regularly, he will not be afraid of going in with white to the French defense, because players who play the trompe sometimes are also e4 players, and they play d4 as a surprise weapon. Of course, if Huang Renji generally plays the French defense, it shouldn't be a problem. Just for you guys to notice, I'm going to do the normal moves to get to this position. Knight here. This is the classic. And here, bishop to e7 is the main move, but d takes e4, knight takes e4, and knight b to d7 is one of the Rubinstein variations. I'm not sure if it's Rubinstein or Bern. Bariev is the main player of this line. Lennart Dominguez also plays it quite a lot. George Mayer from Germany, now Uruguay, is also a very strong player in this line. And you can notice that it's exactly the same position as the one we have here, after knight f3. So it's just a move transposition. So, bishop to e7. The knight is hanging, so black exchange. And now black gets hit by h4. So by playing h4, white already shows his clear intentions of long castling and playing for the attack, because after playing h4, we're not really thinking of casting on the king side. Instead, we will castle on the queen side. Black shouldn't capture the bishop, because after pawn takes, we open up the rook against what will most likely be black's king side, castle king. So black castles, castle. And now there are several moves. Queen to d2, bishop to d3. Karthik played queen to d3. I actually didn't know this move, and at first glance, I'm not a big fan of this move. I prefer a more stable square, which is d2. But there are some ideas. One of them is to put the queen on e4 and then follow up with bishop to d3. And generally, we do this by playing bishop to d3 first and then queen to e2 for queen to e4. But this delays long castling, and Karthik wants the long castle very fast, because after c5, long castle, pawn takes pawn, he goes queen to e4. Now this might be something he actually prepared at home, because for the moment he is down a pawn, but it seems that this is carefully worked out, because after knight to c5, he plays queen to f4, and this is the sort of position that you probably have worked out at home, because queen to d3, queen e4 and queen to f4 doesn't seem so natural, but I checked it with the computer and it's the computer's first line, so I would suspect that this has been worked out at home by Karthik. Now black plays a good move, but a bad follow-up. He plays e5, which is a good move. Knight takes e5, but now the follow-up is not correct. He should have played bishop takes knight and queen to a5, which is a very, very tricky move. Threatening knight to b3, picking up the queen on a5, but also sort of like hitting the pawn on a2. Queen takes d4. Now the pawn can't be captured because the knight would fall. Nothing is happening here. But now bishop to f5 is quite a decent move, and I would say that this position is highly complicated. White does have an extra pawn, but he's lacking in development. All of black pieces are aggressively situated. The computer still gives a very slight advantage for white, but I think I would be comfortable going into this position with the black pieces. So, by playing e5, Huang actually had the right idea, but didn't do the correct follow-up. Instead, he captured on g5, which, as we said before, will usually be a mistake, but he had calculated that after pawn takes knight e6, he calculated that he would pick up this pawn with check. Now, I have to say that if I see this with black, I'd be very tempted to do this exact variation. So we can't really say anything negative towards Huang Renji. First of all, because he's 2,500, much better than us. And second, because if you consider that he's playing a forced variation and now he's picking up the pawn and exchanging the queens, I mean, it perfectly makes sense. But Karthik had seen further, or had prepared it at home and knew that this line was favorable for him, but very tempting for his opponent to go into. As you can see, queen to h4 threatens mate, queen takes pawn check, queen takes, knight takes, and now rook takes pawn. getting the pawn back, and now we have an ending. Now this is a very tricky ending because what does black play here? For example, if black plays bishop to e6, which is a natural move, then the knight has no square. Already this is a problem. The best move is to drop back with the knight, but it's always hard to play a backward move when you're undeveloped. White would have played rook to d1, and now the second move would be rook to d8, another difficult move to find. The computer gives these moves, but a human would have trouble finding these natural moves. He'd be thinking more on the lines of, how do I get my bishop out? Bishop to c4, take, and king f8, and unbelievably, I've had this situation in the past before, and although white is super active, there is no immediate way to cash in, and therefore at some point black will be able to finish development and the game is more or less equal. Definitely not easy to see at all. Instead, Huang played f6, giving space to the knight, pushing back the knight theoretically, but weakening fatally this diagonal. And check this out now. Knight to d7, excellent move. If black captures, we put the rook on the 7th, and already we're dominating the position. But of course, Huang Rei had already decided after f6 to play rook to e8. But now, the knight on d7 disconnects the bishop and the knight. So we can check on c4 and black doesn't have bishop to e6. For example, if knight to e6, we just cash in on the pin. Now this pin will eventually win us a piece. A nice tactic to check out here is that in this position we can play bishop takes knight check. It's very, very important to recognize these ideas. Instead, black went to the corner, and already here, if you're perceptive, you know that with a bishop hitting the rook and an open H file, they are going to be Anastasiia mates, some other lolly mates, a lot of sacrificial mates with the king in the corner. You just have to find them. So we start off with f4, pushing the knight back, and we continue with rook to e1, hitting the knight. Big trouble now. Black played rook to d8, trying to get the knight back. If black had played f5, then the correct move is bishop to f7, hitting the rook. And after bishop takes, we just take, and here we're completely winning. And if rook to e7, knight to b6 hits the rook, and we have a mate on the 8th rank. Rook to d8 looks okay, but here comes the killer. Knight to e5, fantastic move. Threatening rook takes rook, but also threatening some devious checks here on g6 and f7. Black decided to resign. He's completely lost. If rook takes rook, we check here and we mate with this fantastic mate. And there's not really any other move that black can do. I mean, he's being hit by knight to f7 straight away, and he can't capture the knight because of rook takes rook. All in all, a fantastic game by Karthik. I would definitely think that most of this game was prepared at home by Karthik in one of his home preparation sessions. And Huang Reng was on the unfortunate side of some really cool home preparations. So in this game, we've learned how to take advantage of move transpositions. We've also learned how to put pressure. Even without the queens, we can still find some really cool tactics if the position gives that opportunity. And I do think that we've had the opportunity to meet two young, very strong players who we will definitely see in the future in more tournaments. If you enjoyed the video, please, as usual, give me a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It's completely free, and let's try and increase these subscribers. Improve your game, enjoy, learn, and hopefully we'll see each other on the boards very soon. And before I leave, just I'll leave you here with a photo where I was in the World Blitz and Rapid. this past weekend in London. Had a great time. Saw a lot of friends. And very soon I'll be on the road again for FIDE, in new endeavors, in new events, new tournaments, helping out with the communication and bringing everyone the best moves and interviews and games of the tournaments. See you soon, guys. Have fun.